What's up, y'all? We've got Jill Bruno in the house today. She is an SDR elite, and we are super blessed to have her and her wisdom through years of SDR leadership to bring to you and ultimately to help you break into tech sales. So, Jill, welcome. Thanks for being here. Why should we listen to you?
Thank you. I feel extra smiley today because we go so far back. So I'm really excited to be here with you above all others because, again, this is going to be a fun time. But you guys should listen to me because I have been in the SDR space for probably 10 years now. I spent a lot of time as an IC being an SDR myself, and I've probably spent maybe the last 6 years in leadership. And for better or worse, my story is a little different. Is I had to learn a lot on my own. I never had the strongest leaders that understood what an SDR should be, what they shouldn't be, and success. So I had to get really scrappy and fight for my career. So I think that's just something that I bring to the table that's a little bit different is a lot of my perspective is me. It's not 10 years of leadership who molded me that way. So you get
Mm,
what you get with me, but I fought really hard to make it this far.
I love that. And that's actually just before we even get into your top three interview questions, that is how SDR leadership works, unfortunately. Where if you're a top performer, then you're likely going to get promoted forward into a leadership role with zero training
Mhm.
around how to actually be a leader. So the reason Jill and I go way back is because a couple of years ago, we connected with our friend Riplin and we were like, guys, what the heck are we doing? What are we supposed to do? How do we get good at
Oh,
this job? Because no one's teaching us. And man, we just started sharing the wins, the losses, the best practices.
mhm.
And yeah, Jill, you are now working with one of the highest performing SDR organizations out there. So
Mhm.
you have absolutely earned your right to sit at this table. And we're looking forward to learning from you.
Awesome. No,
So,
I appreciate it.
with that being said, what are your top three favorite interview questions to ask SDR candidates?
Awesome. So I'm going to give you the ugly truth behind all of this. So I'm going to be frank. If I ask you this, is it a trick question? Is it not? Because I really want to see how people act in an authentic way. So before I even start my interview, I am me. For better or worse, I'm going to treat you exactly the way I treat my team. I hate when people get like so overly stuffy and professional and everybody feels tense. So I do keep it very casual and not saying it's a trick. I just want to see who is this actual person without them trying to tell me what I want to hear. So I
Mm,
kind of get that housekeeping out of the way that, let's be honest with each other. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear because if we have to part ways after today because it's not a fit, like that is okay. I think there's so much pressure where people think they need to be, again, sometimes someone they're not. So I try to get that out of the way. So after that spiel, I will say, okay, before I jump in, what questions do you have for me? And that's
wow.
where after I tell them, be you, I'm me, sometimes I get wild answers and I'm like, okay, you just exploded negativity from your last company, or you had really thoughtful questions and I know that you were prepared. So
Mm,
again, it's kind of a trick question, but also not because I just want to see how people do present themselves. So again, that is the most important question that I ask. What do you have for me before we start?
mhm.
And I know that this could lead into some of the bad experiences that I've had interviewing this past year because I've done a lot of interviewing in 2024 so far. But I really just want to hear, is there thoughtfulness behind it? Is it a silly question that you could have found on our website or on my LinkedIn? I can't tell you how many people start with, can you tell me what your company does? And I'm like, oh, geez, like that's your first question before
I
we.
have to be on an interview for 27 more minutes with you. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and that stinks because as a hiring manager, that's what goes through our brains is what is going to make me progress this to the next stage? What are some red flags that I want to dig further into because it could go either way? Or what is just such a swing and miss that I now know this next 20 minutes, no matter what they say, this is unfortunately not going to be a fit. But and even to give some examples, I actually jotted some down just because I really want to pay it forward with examples here. Thoughtful questions are, you know, and tell me about the day to day and your management style. How do you interact with your team? Right now, I work for an organization where we have a lot of clients is for services. So tell me about how do we work with the clients? How many people on the team are hitting? How many are not hitting? Why? What is your game plan to support those folks that aren't hitting? Because, sometimes people, they get nervous about a PIP. Like, what is that actionable coaching advice for those members? What is ongoing in development? What does career trajectory look like? How many folks have, been promoted off of the team? How many folks have left on their own terms? How many of you had to terminate? These are really important questions about just the health of the business. And, why do we want to work with certain clients? Why do we not want to work with certain clients? So
Mm.
there's a lot that you can, talk to a recruiting manager about the direction of the company without like, what's the pay? What's the salary? Like, don't dive into that. Like, let's make sure that you're really interested in the organization. So that's my first before we start questions. The second question I always make sure to get to is, tell me about a time where you had a really great game plan. You had this idea that was going to just change the world. You were so pumped about it. You execute it flawlessly and it didn't work out. It happens to all of us. So just share a time where, things didn't go to plan. And the third question is going to be around coachability. Can you talk to me about ways you like to be coached, ways you learn best, how you and your previous manager worked together to share feedback back and forth? Talk to me about, what is your style?
Those are
So,
all so good because they all hit like three essential points of a good SDR. Someone who's thoughtful, they came prepared, they know how to ask good questions, they understand a business, how it works. The second one is, how do they handle failure? How do they plan? Are they someone who dreams? Do they have these like big goals? And then third, are you coachable? Are you humble? Can I actually work with you? Like, what else do you need to know about an SDR at that point?
I mean, exactly, because that's the thing. This job, it's a hard job. And that's where I get really defensive of the SDR world. Like, all SDRs are just my babies that I want to just help grow because it's tough out there. People are negative about us all the time. Everyone wants to hate on the cold callers, but the people who share the hate are the folks that actually won't do it themselves. So, you do need a certain breed of, you're going to get told off time to time. You're going to deal with rejection every single day. There's going to be times where you're going to get coached and it might not be what you like to hear, but as long as you have a good leader, you just have to understand the process, trust the process, because they only want to make you better. But sometimes people just, they have their guards up and a little too much resistance. And that's where it just might not be the career for you, which is okay. But
Mm-hmm.
it's better to find it out now than to, life is too short to have a job that makes you miserable. So if there's certain red flags that it's not going to make it work, let's just chat through it now.
Absolutely. It takes a certain kind of insane person to sign up for a job where the success rate of the different metrics in your role are like 5%. If you have a 5% connect rate, that's success. 5% of the time, right? Like, that's insane. If you can book 20% of the meetings that you have conversations with, that's considered good in sales, right? If you can convert half your meetings to paid opportunities, that's considered good. That's a 50% failure rate. Like, it takes a certain person that's just a little bit different of a perspective in life to say, "Yep, I want to do that. I think that's going to be the right fit for me."
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Love it. So, okay, let's start with question number 1 then. And I love how you do this because it probably totally derails the candidate when the first question you ask them is, "What questions do you have for me?"
Oh, it's totally a pattern interrupt. And I do that intentionally. So I'm here to be raw and real right now. So I'm going to tell you kind of the why behind it because certain things, for better or worse, they kind of are a trick question. And I don't mean them to be, but I really just want to see, who is this person as they are without faking it or telling me what I want to hear. I think that's a
Mm.
disservice to both me and to them, quite frankly. So I start every interview giving my same speech of, I'm going to treat you the same way I treat everybody else on my team. I really hate when people on interviews just get so uptight and they make you feel like everything is a trick question. Then you feel nervous and they feel nervous and it's just not productive. And you leave feeling really, really icky. I don't
Yeah.
want that. Even if it's the worst interview I've ever been on with a candidate, I want you to leave feeling fabulous about me, your experience chatting, and also with the organization that I represent at the time. So after, again, I get their guard down because I bring my guard down. That's where it's, okay, Jack, before we jump in, I really like to clear the air and make sure that any top of mind questions that you have, let's just address it now. So that way they don't linger throughout the interview. So Jack, what do you have for me?
Wow, I love that. I love
And,
that.
but it's funny though, because that's when people are like, oh, So my last manager was awful, and I just need somebody like, and it just could be like show up and throw up negativity, and I'm like, ooh, red flag, red flag. Or,
Yeah.
some people are really prepared with thoughtful questions. So even to rattle some that I appreciate when SDRs come prepared, which is, talk to me about the day to day, really in the weeds. How am I going to spend my time? How am I going to be trained by you? How do we work with clients? What clients do we want to work with? What clients do we not want to work with? How much of the team is hitting? How much of the team is not hitting? How are you supporting those team members who are falling below quota? What does that development look like? What does the career trajectory look like? What is the room for growth? Who on the team, or I guess the company too, who's left on their own terms? Have you gone through layoffs where people didn't want to leave, but you had no choice? Just talk to me about the state of the business. What direction is the organization going? Because my belief is every candidate should be interviewing that company just as much as they are interviewing you. It absolutely goes both ways. So you need to be prepared with those really thoughtful questions about what do you want? And
Mm.
that's where if you can get that addressed in the top of the interview, you can really take control and have a fruitful conversation for the remainder of your time.
This whole topic in itself, like there's so much here we could talk about because the questions that candidates ask you are ultimately revealing who they are, right?
Mhm.
So as a candidate, that can make or break you. If you're not asking good questions, immediate red flag. It shows that you didn't come prepared. It shows that you don't know how to think about business. You don't really even know the purpose of the role you signed up for. And I'm sorry, there's just no excuse for not being prepared because we live in the information age. You can literally go on ChatGPT. What does this company do? Who do they sell to? Who are some of their competitors? Like that takes 5 minutes. The
Mhm.
reason you won't do it though is because you're lazy, right? And so don't be lazy because that's going to be exposed right away. But it can make you where if you, Jill, those questions you just asked me, if you came to me as a candidate and asked those, I would be like, wow, Jill is super professional. Like she knows what I'm thinking about and she's asking me questions about it. And the level of separation from average lame questions that Jill and I get all the time to really thoughtful questions, it's a huge population split there, but it's really easy to cross that chasm because literally all you need to do is ask better questions.
Mhm.
Right. And so I don't know, Jill, if you've had this experience, but I've had candidates come in and I'll start the interview that way too, because it shows everything I need to know in that moment.
Mhm.
They'll ask one, two, three really simple, lame, boring questions they could have found on their own. And I already know I don't want to move this person forward,
Mhm.
but there's 36 minutes left or 26 minutes left in the interview. And I'm like hating the rest of the time with them. And I'm literally just trying to figure out when does this interview end? How can I get them out of here? What I started to do is I started to be very transparent with those candidates. And I would just tell them right off the cuff, like, hey, look, the purpose of me asking that question was to see how prepared you were. And if you don't know what my company does or you don't have good questions, you're not prepared. And so I think as much as I want to keep peace with you and make you feel good about yourself and finish this combo, I want to help you. And if you're doing this in interviews, you're never going to land a job. So what you need to go do is come prepared better next time. Unfortunately, I'm going to say no right now. I'm going to end this combo early, but I want you to know that with these changes, you can go be successful. So I'm
Mhm.
just curious to hear your thoughts there, Jill. Like with radical transparency, is that something that you're a fan of in interviews if you do level with someone, or are you like the rest of us, me, who like you're just trying to be comfortable through the end of the interview and just get it over with?
So, two things to say on that before I get to that question. The reason this is such an important topic is this is also displaying the skills during the interview that the job takes. Because based on this not so great scenario, I would never feel comfortable having an SDR represent me, my team, and my organization with a prospect. Because you need to be curious. We're not just showing up with a pen and paper qualifying with lame questions. We need to dig deep to understand the problems. So you should want to understand what are the problems with the team? What are the problems with the company? Everyone has them. Nobody is perfect, but what are you going to identify that makes your list of pros or cons? So, like I said, you should be interviewing both ways. Now, I will be very honest here. I am not the person that would probably do what you did. And it makes me feel like perhaps it's a disservice to that person because I think my strength and weakness is I believe everybody is good. I believe everyone has good intentions. Nobody wants to sabotage and be a bad interviewer.
Yeah.
So what I usually do is, I hear those things in my head, red flags. I take notes for everything. So I'm definitely writing down anything that you're saying I love or hate.
Hmm.
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and see how the rest of the conversation has gone. Because I will admit, there's been times where the first 5-10 minutes, I'm like, oh, definitely rejecting this person.
Yeah.
They're able to spin it around. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's nerves.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
many people are getting laid off. So many people have families to feed that I'm like, you know what? Maybe that just wasn't their best couple moments. But the fact that they spun it around on an interview, which is always nerve wracking, let me hear them out. And there has been times where they really have. Not always, but I
Yeah.
usually just let it keep going.
Yeah.
So,
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. Well, I love that first question because it puts all of the onus on them. It's their time to shine. They
mhm.
make it or break it with that kind of question. So, rolling into the second favorite question you like to ask, go ahead and restate it for us and then start to get into like, why do you ask that?
Mhm. So the next question that I like to ask is, tell me about a great idea that you had or an initiative that you were running with your team or your organization. It could even be, college, a sports team if somebody this is their first job, but tell me about a time you believed you had the best idea, you had all the results lined out, you were ready to go, and it failed. So this is where I'm looking for people, oh, that's never happened. Nobody's perfect. It could be something as simple as you were shopping for the best Christmas gifts to make your mom happy. You went to every single store and you couldn't find it because your lesson learned is don't shop the week before Christmas and shop the months before. No matter
Mm,
how you spin it, there is a story to tell of failure. And a big thing that I'm looking for is, are you going to own it? I respect somebody who owns a mistake 1,000%. But one of the things that grinds my gears is the blame game. Well, I wanted to hit quota and I had a new cold call script, so I was ready to do it, but then marketing didn't give me leads and then da 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 da, and it's everybody else's fault.
yep.
That drives me nuts because I believe it's a team mindset. Everybody has their part, but don't sit there like you are perfect and it's everyone else's fault because that's not good. So
Hmm.
again, I'm just looking for vulnerability, share a time that it didn't work out. And I know we're not onto the third question yet, but it really leads into how do you like to receive feedback and be coached?
Mm,
Because if you had an opportunity that things didn't work out, how do we overcome that next? So I can pause that for now, but I really
yeah.
like to see how people chat through that.
Yeah. And I think what you're hitting on here is just a mindset shift for employees, entry level employees. Most people have gone through the education system where it's pass fail. And if you raise your hand in class, you're wrong. Like you shouldn't have questions. You shouldn't raise your hand in class, right? And that culture is so embedded in us of anti-failure, anti-failure, like I cannot fail. Sales, SDR, I need you to fail. If you
Mhm.
aren't failing, you're lying to me and you're going to get pipped in 3-4 months and this is going to be a waste of time. My best reps are the ones who can wear failure on their shoulders, on their sleeve, and say, hey, I screwed up here. How do I get better? Can you listen to this call? It's terrible. I know. Those are the people that do the best. So if you're someone who's coming into an interview and you're trying to kind of what Jill, you've said from the beginning of like, I don't want a facade. I don't want this wall of perfection and stuffiness. Just be you. The more humble you are, the more failure accepting you are, the better you're going to do in sales. Because if you've never done this before, how are you going to execute it to perfection? So, love that that question is basically indexing for, are you self aware? Are you humble? What did you learn? And if you don't have an example for that, it just means you really haven't prepared much for these interviews. Because, of course, we're going to index you for failure. It's sales.
Yeah, no, and again, it's really just we're all human, and that's something that I always try to convey, whether I'm mentoring somebody or just chatting about life and work. We are all human. I don't care if you're a janitor on your first day or the CEO of $1 billion company. Everybody has flaws. Nobody is perfect. So it's okay to recognize that within yourself. And also just don't compare because that could just turn into a downward spiral. So, we're all human. And that's what I
Yeah.
like to see is that, I'm human, you're human, and we can just work through it. Because it's not about the failure. It's not about falling. It's about confidently picking yourself up and continuing.
Yeah, 1000%. And I will say, as hiring managers, we super value and appreciate vulnerability.
Hmm.
And so that thing, when you think about the worst failure in your life, that thing that comes to mind, you probably don't want to share with anyone, especially in a professional context, especially in an interview with someone.
Hmm.
But that thing that carries so much pain, shame, so much brokenness, if you can present that thing as a catalyst in your life of I went through this. This is what happened to me and this is how I took ownership of it and this is how it's shaped my life after that.
Hmm.
If you have that in your story, I mean, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we'd appreciate that as SDR managers where it's like, wow, you've gone through hard stuff in life. You've
Hmm.
reconciled with it, you've wrestled it, and boom, here you are using it as a strength, something
Hmm.
that's pushing you instead of something that's holding you back.
And like, this is where I feel like I want to like, I'm getting emotional because the more you open up, you're going to realize what you consider, your weakest moments, your demons, your hardest time in life. And listen, not saying you have to talk about it. Everybody has different paths, but as you share that story and how it shaped you into the person that you are, you would be so shocked how many people can sit back and be like, wow, like that happened to me too. I had that experience. I've been there before. And then you're like, wow, like I feel so much better for sharing because now you've connected with somebody, you don't feel alone, and that's where you also start to find your tribe. And I don't want to go like too off on this because like again it makes me emotional, but just show up, be yourself, and be vulnerable because I think you're going to create more bonds than friction 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and what you're doing is you're earning the trust of another human being, and now they're bought in on you. They want to see you be successful after the trauma you went through or whatever that is. I mean, I remember as an SDR interviewing for my first role, I had gone through drug addiction. I went to jail, DUI, had some like broken family dynamics, and I was so afraid if any of that came out. And I still had a record at that point while I was interviewing. I was afraid initially if any of that came out there's no way they would hire me. So I actually went the opposite direction and I led with that. When
Hmm.
that failure question came up, I was like, I can tell you about failure. Like 3 years ago, I was in a jail cell. 3 years ago, I was a drug addict. 3 years ago, I had nothing. And here I am today. And
Hmm.
here's my journey of growth and what I overcame, what I went through. I know what failure feels like. That's why I'm here today because I know that I never want to go back there again. And you can actually tie it into your life why, but then how sales is going to be the vehicle that helps you accomplish the life why. So to Jill's point, like maybe you're not there yet in your healing journey with what you've been through, but that is a weapon. That is something that can just clobber the competition to the left and right because other people are saying, "Oh yeah, I barely passed my chemistry class in college." And it's a good example, right? But how much more compelling is it when you're talking about the trauma and the hurt you've gone through in life and how you're using that to shape your future through sales?
Yeah, no, and I really love that we're talking about this too because like I said, I hear so much of this more than you'd ever think. And I actually don't speak publicly about it. I speak more one off, but I don't even care. I always share, like, I come from a lot of childhood trauma, so much childhood trauma. And that has created me, has turned me into a perfectionist. There's actually 4 quadrants of childhood trauma if you just Google them. And I'm the workaholic, the perfectionist. I don't stop and smell the roses. If I do my to do list, I don't celebrate it. I just create a new one. So as I've recognized, hey, Jill, you're being really hard on yourself, it's actually tied back to your past. That has allowed me to better cope with things because there's 2 paths. And I'll give an example of I coached this SDR. He was on my team for a while in past company. And I probably didn't train him to, cold call enough. But leadership forced it. We had to do it. And I was basically told, Jill, start your team cold calling today. And I was like, okay. So again, I was more of a junior leader at the time, but he got ripped to shreds. And this person was nasty. Told him he was deserving of flipping burgers, nothing else. Quit sales now. This guy had the audacity to email him afterwards. Here are sales books. Give it a read if you're able to, because you really suck at your job. Just, there was no
Wow.
reason for it. And this guy came to me almost in tears, like, Jill, I never want to cold call again. This guy, this is what he believed it. And it took a lot of mental healing for this individual to pick it up and move forward, because there's two paths. You can let something negative crush you and then you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Or you turn it into your strength of, screw that person. Yeah, that was a bad call. I own it. I listened to the recording and this is what I'm going to do better. This is how I'm going to handle the objection. Maybe I'm going to end the call 3 minutes earlier. I'm done with that. But you choose the path forward of, this is how it is my superpower and I'm going to learn. And that is so powerful.
Yeah.
And you just have to learn how to do it. And again, by sharing openly, that's where you find your tribe.
The choice is binary. There's only two ways to proceed. You
Mm-hmm.
either let that thing trap you and you become a victim to it,
Mm-hmm.
or you decide to own it, fight through it, and now you're a victor through it, and you're victorious over it. So if you're still listening at this point, you're like, how the heck did we get here during an interview? But it's so important to realize that as SDR leaders, like Jill and I have interviewed hundreds, probably thousands combined of SDR candidates. We want transparency. We want vulnerability. I would rather hire the person who grew up through a lot of trauma, who overcame it, fought through it, and is here today with a chip on their shoulder, than the person who sailed through college, easy grades, president of everything, and boom, now you're here.
Mm-hmm.
Because who's going to fight for me? Who on that third week of the month when we're 30% to quota, who's going to be the one that steps up and says, I don't care where we are, I'm going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the one who's been through failure. So
Yeah.
if you can just show us through transparency, vulnerability, through your story, that you're that person, that you're willing to outwork anyone to the left or right of you, you're going to have my vote to move forward.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
All right, let's get into coachability. So restate that third question for us and
Yes.
why you ask it.
So the last question that, well, not the last question, but one of the three that I always make sure to hit on is, talk to me about ways you like to receive feedback. Also, ways you like to learn. Everybody is different, and I do my best as a leader to accommodate that, to mentor that. So, talk to me about, how did you work with your last manager? How did they help you during a month that maybe you weren't performing? What are, again, tell me about you. How do you like to receive feedback? And again, this is where I sometimes do get wild answers of, I want to be left alone. I want a remote job because I don't really want to talk to other people. Like, just, I'm good. I've done this job for, 5 years. I don't need help. Bye. Okay. That means you're not going to be open to new ideas. You're not going to listen to me, and we're probably going to bump heads.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really not what I'm looking for. But I like the people who are curious, who have those thought-provoking questions of, yeah, I love feedback. I'm always looking, like, where is that hunger? Where is that thirst? Because everybody should have that. I don't care what level of roles that you're in, your seniority, years, none of that matters. You should always be looking for that next new way, especially in sales where, now open rates are going to be blocked by Google, and, call connects are lower than ever. Data is just outdated because of employee turnover and layoffs. Bounce rates are crazy. Like, you have to think outside of the box, because what worked yesterday probably doesn't work today. And if you don't have that open mindset to hear people out, hear the feedback of things that you probably could have done a little bit better, but also be open to the feedback of, listen, like, Jack, you crushed that objection. Can I put you on the spot in our team training? I'd love for them to hear from you how you were able to navigate that. So there's just so many ways that this answer can turn into, positives or negatives, because, like, what you've really hit on is, we want people who can be trained, who want to listen, who want to be here, who want to fight for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't display that through coachability, you're never going to make it as an SDR. It's a tough job.
Not at all. And if you're someone who has prior experience and you know that you know the job, what you don't want to do is come across arrogant or cocky,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what you can do, because if you do have prior experience, we do have higher expectations of you for sure, versus someone who's never done this job.
Mm-hmm.
So the way to talk about that in terms of coachability is, hey, I have things that I know work for me, and what I want to do on your team is I want to execute those things, but I'm going to bring them right back to you for feedback. And I also want to try new things that I might not be aware of. And so there's a way to balance that initiative you're going to take with the confidence you should have, having experience, with humility and with accountability and with open-mindedness. Now, if you're someone who doesn't have experience, Well, I don't know. Did you ever play sports growing up? Talk about that. Talk about how you love being coached. My football coach would always get on to me, and even though I didn't really like him for it, I loved him for it at the end because he made me better, right? Examples like that. Maybe you've had a tutor through school or something like that. So you can lean on those examples of when you've been coached before, even if it's not in a professional context. The
Hmm.
third answer, if you really can't think of anything, answer it from the perspective of, look, transparently, I have not had strong coaches in my life. And I crave to be in that environment because I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to be better. And so the opportunity to join your team and a leader like you who cares about coaching, that's something I'm so fired up for and I can't wait for. So there you go. You have no excuse to not answer that question well. Everyone has an answer right there.
And what this also made me think of is, a lot of times in sales roles, there might be a role play. There may be that last final interview of, show me a sequence, show me a call script. Like, here's a company, like, tell me how you would prospect into them. And to me, it was wild where I did just go through a lot of hiring recently. Again, this whole year I've done it, and that was part of it. And some people told me it wasn't worth their time. They had better things to do than to complete an assessment. I was like, that's all. I mean, I appreciate your honesty, but some people would just show up with terrible chat GPT, different font sizes, everything. And it's like, you didn't put thought into that. But this is the opportunity where I am going to give you feedback. Even if you show up with the best presentation I could have ever seen, I'm going to intentionally make sure to give you feedback because this is a way to really display not only my style, but I get to see your style too. So keep your ears perked for this because there's different ways that we're looking for these traits and, just the way people react to certain things. So, it could be through that role play, which listen, everyone is nervous. We're not expecting perfection ever, but we just want to see if I'm like, hey, like one thing that is always debatable is when you have a cold call, do I say, hey Jack, it's Jill. It's a cold call. Like, I feel like that's like such a hot take where some are like, yeah, you say it's a cold call. And some are, you never say it's a cold call. But if I ask you why, it's not because I think it's wrong. I just want to understand your brain. So
Yeah.
I guess it's don't overthink things, but just, show up and be ready to change for the better.
Yeah, there could be a whole podcast of interview horror stories, and your experience is not, you're not the only one, I would
Yeah.
say, that has had experiences like that. And I think, Jill, you've probably seen the comments on posts where it's like, this is how you should land an SDR job. And all the comments are like hating, like, why is it so hard? Have you seen those?
I mean, it's tough. It's a tough market right now. So yeah, I see stuff.
Yeah, and look, whether it should be that way or not, it honestly doesn't matter. The question is, do you want a job or not?
Hmm.
Like, deal with it. Tough nubs. Yes, this is what's required today. It is very intense, takes a lot of work. You are going to have to do projects and you're going to get ghosted. Do you want a job or not? You
Hmm.
get to be a victim, you get to be a victor. It's your choice. And that's why people like Jill, people like myself, we're here to support because we know it's hard. But if
Hmm.
you're coachable, if you're willing to do the work, then you can make it happen. So
Hmm.
that's probably a good transition point, Jill, for the last question I have for you. What advice do you have for people trying to land SDR roles today?
So I'm not reinventing the wheel with this, but show us the skills that the job requires to get the interview. So if it's an outbound role, an SDR role, whatever it is, go outbound to me. Write me a really thoughtful message on LinkedIn because if you do your homework, I post all the time. I'm on LinkedIn all day. That's where I'm hanging out. I am your prospect. Write me a message. Don't demand an interview either, because that's something I've noticed. So many people, they're not trying to earn my time, they're demanding my time. I don't like that. But again, put thoughtfulness into a personalization based on what I am putting out there. Same with my company. Do your homework. Who's my CEO? Like right now, there's two heads of sales development. Do you know who my counterpart is, or do you just know who I am? But do that. And also, I interviewed again all year. I think I got two messages on my cell phone, which not saying I want my personal line, blown up, but you bet those were people who got interviews. I just got a really thoughtful text message redirecting me to the LinkedIn message. Guess what? Wink, wink. That's half of outbound. One channel pushing to the other. Who got my email? I think I got one person to my business email for my last round of interviewing at this job. I interviewed for months. I got one email. And guess what? It's not hard. My email is my first name at altisales.com. Like, it's pretty easy.
It's
I'm sure I'm all
ridiculous.
over Zoom info. So, silence, I think, is your worst enemy, but showing the skills. And again, we're not looking for perfection. I'm looking for attention to detail that you've tried and effort. Because to be honest, I would rather have somebody on my team that is looking to grow than somebody with, 15 years of experience, because then I know I'm like, you might be an old dog that doesn't want to learn new tricks, and that could be frustrating for me and for you.
Yeah. Micro question, then a macro point. Micro question, as you said, don't demand time. So what's like a bad example? And then how might they ask that in a better way to try to land on your calendar?
So I've had a couple individuals who hound me. I need a job. You have to interview me. Where's your calendar link? Why are you ignoring me? I see you posted on LinkedIn, but you still haven't made time to interview me. I need one person was like, I need a W-2 job right now. You can give that to me. I don't know, I'm just rambling now, but just people saying like, give me your calendar link.
Wow.
You have to interview me, but you haven't sold me. You're barking at me. And I hate this, but I don't owe anyone anything.
Correct.
You have to earn it and be respectful about it, because some people were just rude. And I'm like, why are you being mean?
Yeah.
You want me to hire you and you're just being rude and mean. So again, very point blank, just saying they deserve my time.
Yeah. So the way that it should or could sound would be...
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I like when people are really thoughtful, like, hey, Jack, I noticed the role. You compare current experience to what the role is looking for. I really believe that I'm such a great fit. I feel like from what I've read on your LinkedIn post that you and I could get along really well. You're tying so many different personalization aspects together. I really look forward to earning your time. I'm really hoping to interview with you. I look forward to interviewing. So just that softer ending, not interview me right now or give me your time. There's just ways to be just more kind about it, I guess.
100%. And it all comes back to treating your job search like you would the real role. So would you ever go to a prospect and demand their time? You must take this meeting with me or else. No, you want to be adding value. You want to be relevant. And then you want to gently ask, hey, would you be opposed to setting up 15 minutes where you and I can talk about the opportunity? Right? Or, hey, I'd love to earn some time on your calendar to speak to you about the opportunity at hand. Right? So that approach makes way more sense. Now, on the macro level of what you're talking about, so many people, I think, overcomplicate getting an SDR job, where there's two extremes. You either don't do anything, you easy apply, and you don't have a job. I wonder why. Or you're like, okay, I have to do the job to get the job, and it's so hard, and I have to be this SDR. I don't know what an SDR does. Let me go be super complex. The reality is, 3 months ago, I posted a role. It got 387 applicants. 68 people reached out to me. That's 18% of the population reached out to me. 82% of the population, zero chance you're getting an interview. 68 people reached out. You might go, wow, they did the job. Do I have time to read through 68 LinkedIn DMs while I'm managing a team of 12 reps, trying to hit quota? I have a wife and I have a son. Nope. Don't have time to read 68 LinkedIn DMs. I got 13 emails. I think it's 4% of the population sent me an email. 4% of the population, where half your day is writing cold emails. Those 13 emails, similar issue though. I have 30 unread emails for my day job, and all the emails look the same. I then got, I think, 9 cold calls total. 2% of the population. This is a full-time cold calling role. 2% of the population picked up their phone and called me. 7 of them left voicemails. I got 3 videos in total through the entire process. And people wonder why they can't get into tech sales. It's because you're not picking up the phone. It's because you're not willing to put in the work. And that doesn't mean you need to go become an expert SDR. It just means literally go to Apollo, sign up for a free account, look up Jill's number and call her, leave her a voicemail, then email her, then drop her a message on LinkedIn. You're good to go. You're going to get her attention. So anything on that note of doing the job to get the job?
One other thing that we missed but didn't hit on is also leverage LinkedIn voice notes.
Yeah.
So many people neglect them. When I get it, I'm like, "Ooh, what does it say? I don't know what it means." I don't know why. There's just this excitement, and I don't know, maybe it'll die out soon, but it's like you get a text from a friend, "Hey, we need to talk." And then you're instantly like, "About what? Is this good? Is this bad? Is it exciting? Is it fun?" So whenever I see those messages come through, I will always listen to them. I believe I got one LinkedIn voice note throughout months of applying, and you actually had much more success of folks reaching out to you. I barely had that.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Oh.
bar is low, y'all. The bar is low to stand out. So I don't want to hear any complaints about how hard it is to get into an SDR role until you are doing the job to get the job.
Mhm.
And, that's exactly what I want to teach you. So I put together a completely free step by step guide in a school community. I'll drop the link below that if you execute, you will get an SDR job. I get hundreds of messages literally over the past few months of people saying, "Thank you. This helped me land a job. This is so helpful." That guide will be in the comments for you. So you can go grab that and implement it. And this guide is how you are going to end up on someone like Jill's calendar to interview for a role and go land that role and land that fully remote 80, 90K tech sales role. So, Jill, thank you so much for being here. Any final words for us?
No, thank you for having me. This really was a pleasure, and Jack and Jill, we'll have to do it again. But
Jack and Jill.
love it. So I do my best to pay it forward as best that I can. So if anyone needs anything, I can't make promises that I will answer, but I will try my best to make sure that I, again, can help you in any way. So please do not hesitate if you listen to this, connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message, whatever I can do to be a resource as well. I just want to help fight the good fight because I know it's tough out there. It's not easy, but we're here to just try to help you stand out amongst the crowd. And I know that you can do it. So always believe in yourself, go that extra mile. And something that I'll leave you with is I love the question when people ask, like, what advice would you give to yourself 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And what I've learned is, and this is going to sound a little funny, is my advice is to listen to advice myself that I would give to somebody else. Because what I find is I always try to help people, give them, advice. This is, advice or comfort. And then when I'm in that situation, I beat myself up. So be kind to yourself, keep fighting, and you got this.
That's good. That's good. And there's three people that are listening to this podcast right now. You're either someone who listens to this and you do nothing with it. You're not going to be successful. Sorry. Person number two, you listen to this and you run straight to Jill's DMs and you say, "Hey, Jill, how do I do all this stuff? Can you look at my resume? Can you go over my call script? Can you do this? Can you do that?" I like the initiative, but you're lazy. Because the third person, they go, "Jill, I listened to your podcast where you spoke to this person about this. I took Jack's guide, implemented this stuff. Here's where I'm at. Can I get your feedback on this?" So, your choice of which person you want to be, but whichever person you want to be, it's your head that hits the pillow at the end of the night. You're the one who has to pay your bills, look yourself in the mirror. So, hold yourself to a high standard. And people like Jill and myself are here to help you fulfill your potential. So, thank you, Jill. Appreciate you being here.
Of course, anytime.